a lot of like, I mean, really the Heat I care about here. It's the only team I really care about mostly in this market. But they kept it. They actually kept the local hour at 9 o'clock, so it was good. But I feel like the show isn't like, it's still a great show, obviously, but I feel like the show maybe went down just a tad. Like I got a little corporate for my taste, and not to say they are corporate, but that time slot 10 to 1 Eastern Standard Time is a time slot that to me it's more geared towards the elite of the personalities, and he has all the actors coming on the show. Patrick has always been on the show, but like guys that I guess I don't really care about. And I felt like the drive time hour in the afternoon was a little more cutting edge.
Yeah,
I kind of missed that.
Well, I get that to a certain extent. I think there's always going to be anytime any kind of change occurs, you're always going to be looking for, all right, what's the difference here? What's the difference here?
And Anthony, mind you, no, let me interrupt you quick, but the change has been very subtle. It's not very major. It's very subtle. But I know that though because I've listened to the show a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've probably been on it longer than me. I was on it before they even went national. So that's when I started watching. They had their little podcast. I mean, not little, but they had their podcasts that I would catch. I started watching because of the ESPN show.
Right.
You know, I said, I like this guy's voice. Or, you know, not his actual voice. His actual voice is kind of whiny, but
highly questionable.
I like what he has to say. And at the time, Bomani was doing the show, the weekly show too, on the podcast. So those shows were always really, really good. So. But I would say the issue with the late, you know, or going so early in the morning is that, they're forced to talk about more topics because people want to hear about that. And while Dan has done everything he could to keep the show, you know, about the things he wants to talk about, because generally he has a really good eye for what's a good topic to get people going. You're forced to, hey, there's a football game on last night, you know, let's talk about it without talking about it directly. And the conversation is always, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk. Well, you're talking about it by not talking about it, if that makes any sense.
Right,
so that's my only gripe.
Yeah, I think what it's too also, okay, so because he did the show 3 to 7 here originally, Eastern Standard Time. Mm-hmm. So by the time he got to 3 o'clock, all those daily stories been exhausted already by the other 4 shows before it. So he has now the freedom to just say, hey, you know what, create my own show and do what I want to talk about. You know, because 10 o'clock is still an early slot after Mike and Mike, people still want that juicy material. Mm-hmm. And you're still getting news in too in the middle of the day as well, on top of that. So he has to kind of sort of bend to corporate a little bit. But I think he's done a good job of keeping the balance because you still get the meat of the LeBatard show. You still get the meat of the comedy and the not being so serious and all this stuff. And and plus I'm happy he hit the local hour because the local hour to me is the best part of the show because to me it stays more raw because it's local. You know what I mean? So and he actually single-handedly made me like a lot of I'm not like a Heat fan or anything or a Miami Dolphins fan, but it tells me something that they're talking about teams that I literally didn't care at all about, but I just wanted to hear their takes on whatever was going on. Let me tell you,
that's talent.
He's been doing the show a long time, but the 4 years LeBron was here, let me tell you, his shows are must-hear radio because between the rants and, you know, and I don't know if you appreciate it. As a Heat fan, it's probably more easier to appreciate because you're part of the ride, you know. LeBatard's in with Riley. You know, he's in with the Heat organization. He knows the guys. So he's a little bit closer. And yet he's not biased. Like, he's still he'll tell you how it is. He's not one of those guys that's a homer. That's not a homer. But those 4 years, from the day we signed LeBron, and the 4 years into that, to me, that's what I miss more than anything. Forget the fact that LeBron's gone. I miss the fun and the atmosphere around the media and sports radio in this market when LeBron's here, and then going through the ups and downs, and going through the 9-8 start, and then losing to Dallas in the first finals, and then being down 3-2 to Boston, and having Bill Simmons come on the radio show after they were down 3-2, and then two games later, we go to the finals and bring back Sims on the show, and then all that. All that stuff and the narratives around it was the most fun I've ever heard on radio.
Yeah, and that's what launched him, right? That's what launched him nationally. Is that he wouldn't have the national voice he has right now if not for LeBron and the run they went on. It was great. I couldn't be more thankful for those guys having a national voice. Yeah, that's for sure.
He was a troll too. Like he'll have Stugatz call Chicago when we were playing the Bulls back in 2011 when the Rose won the MVP. He would call. The Chicago station. Stugatz would call Chicago station and start like just trolling him. And by the way, Stugatz is not even a Heat fan; he's a Knicks fan. So, but because the market. But this stuff like that, I missed all that stuff.
I think it'll take a little bit of time. They're still feeling their way out. I mean, you think about your show, right? How long have you been doing your show for?
This is almost 5 years in.
Right, so your show right now is probably completely different from the first iteration of it, right?
Yeah, more or less, yeah. This podcast started out with me and my buddies. Like, it was my show, and then I had my friends come do roundtables every couple of days, and then it progressed. I started meeting more people, and yeah.
That was the old. Were you involved in the Triple J podcast? Was that what it used to be?
I would co-host once in a while. I would jump on there and whatnot, but I didn't host it, but I was involved.
Yeah, but what I mean though is that they're still in their first year of this type of move, and a move of this type of magnitude. There's going to be growing pains, and I think based on the talent level around the show, not just like with LeBatard and Stugatz, but like Mike Ryan, I don't think there's a better executive producer nationally. So there's so much talent there that there's no way they don't figure it out. And if there's anything to really figure out.
Yeah. I think I'm just been more pickier because I'm actually been around this thing the longest. That's probably why I've been more pickier. I want to ask you more questions as you go. This is something we debated. Actually, we were discussing about a month ago. There was a big media conference with media types. I don't know where it was at. So it was a big conference somewhere. Might be in New York. I'm not sure exactly. And it was focused on media at large and independent media. And a couple of name guys, namely the PTI heads of Michael Wilbon and Tony Kornheiser. And Michael Wilbon was very critical of independent media at large and bloggers and all that stuff. Michael Wilbon, of course, he's close to PTI. He's wrote at the Washington Post. He's done a lot of big stuff. He's one of the biggest names on ESPN. Been there for a long time. But he was very, very let's say negative about the atmosphere around media today. I have some quotes here I'll read off because some people who listen to this podcast probably don't even know what the hell we're talking about because this is more our speed. But here's some of the quotes that he had at his speech during that conference about a month ago. He says, quote, "What bugs me now is that people sit in their mother's basements and write this crap, and they don't have any knowledge of what is going on in that place, and it's too easy to get it. You can go to a game, you can go to a locker room. The only reason to read this stuff is to tell people why something happened, and if you're not there, and you can't tell me why it happened. I don't care about your advanced analytics and all the other things you concoct." So basically what he's saying there, number one, he's a eye test guy, which I am too, but hard to know analytics. He sounds very bitter and angry. And don't get me wrong. He has a point to a point. Like, I don't mind Deadspin. I think Deadspin has a place. But Deadspin could be a bit over the top. Yeah. If we're being totally honest with between you and I. You have other places like that who are a little over the top that kind of almost in some sense make a I don't want to make a mockery, but it is definitely different from the media and the journalism that, say, Wilbon faced, in his years, and then even to me, to a lesser degree, me when I was growing up. I'm 35, so the change is there, and I think the reason he sounds so bitter and angry is that he's actually acknowledging the change in the landscape, and I think it frustrates him. Your thoughts?
Well, I'm sitting here in my mom's basement. I'm just kidding. But the issue I have with it is I noticed this the other day, and I've talked to a couple people about this, is that, and I love newspapers, and there are people that work for newspapers that I respect greatly. You know, there's some really, really talented people out there in the newspapers. And I was looking the other day at an online article for, you know, I think it was the LA Times, and I put it side by side one of the articles I wrote or put together for Dodgers Nation, or I think it was an editorial I edited for Dodgers Nation. And I put the two side by side, and you have one that's just this giant block of writing, you know, and look, I'm sorry, the typical reader has ADD. You have to keep them, you know, interested in the article, not just with the text itself, but throw a picture in there, throw a graph, throw something, you know, and something to break up the rhythm of just reading and reading and reading and reading. And that doesn't seem like that hard a change to make. All it would take is some kind of online editor to just throw in the occasional picture. They have picture staffs that you know, they have photographer staff that they could grab some of their really good pictures that they don't use for the title headline post and just throw that in there. And that seems like a really minor step. And every time you see a newspaper shut down, you get these two, or somebody laid off from an obituary. And don't get me wrong, losing your livelihood is insanely scary. But I'm sorry, I don't have as much empathy as I would if I didn't see them trying to make these changes along the way to catch up with the times. You know, and when you have Michael Wilbon taking a shot like, you know, you're there in your mom's basement. Actually, no, Mike, I'm in a house that I pay for with blogging, you know, and I'm really proud of that. And it's because it's insanely competitive, and you work your tail off, and eventually you get an opportunity that comes your way. And when I got that, he makes some decent points that, you know, there are some unfair shots that come along with not seeing somebody very often. Like if I had to deal with Byron every day, I don't know if I'd say some of the things I say about him on Twitter or in articles or on my podcast. But that seems like a minutia kind of detail, whereas the overriding thing is newspaper, you know, beat writers and bloggers and columnists. You can all coexist, and I think what we're running into is this desire for one or the other to be taken out, whether it's bloggers or people who read bloggers who are sick of columnists and they're typically narrative-driven articles, or people who are used to newspapers who are sick of bloggers and they're damn mad. You know, it's too bad that we've reached this point where one has to go, and I don't think that's how it has to be.
Two things. Number one is generational. You can tell it's generational.
Very.
Because the guys who are blogging and number two, real quick, blogging is a bad name. Like when you say, "Oh, I got a blog," it's like, "Oh, it's like a fucking journal." No, it could be, but it's not. You know,
yeah.
You know, blog gets a really bad name because he has some big names who are bloggers who also are columnists as well too. And you can still differentiate what a blog is, what a column is. I know I can. Like you can differentiate what a podcast is and a radio show. That's easy. You know, it's all about structure. You know, and I feel like, and you're right, they can all coexist, but a lot of it, the main problem is just generational. Most, you know, Wilbon's in his 50s, so he's used to being raised in the newspaper era. You get your newspaper, you read your little op-ed, and then you're done. You read your column, whatever. You read your quick little story on the game, and you're done. You know, it's all generational, and I feel like, and here's a bit of the hypocrisy he has here too, is that he says that basically he's saying what bloggers are shortcutting it, but he's a guy that did mainly, you know, column work and it was a journalist. But when the market changed in the late 90s, early 2000s to more personality-based television appearances, to where you start doing more TV, he jumped all over that. So in a sense, it's the same thing what he did in terms of changing the dynamic from just doing typical newspaper work to jumping on TV and doing, you know, it's really the same thing. Because TV really, you're just giving out the quick subject and the quick answer. It's basically in that analogy, TV would be the blog,